My name is Carolyn Ellis. I'm a student in the Black Wall Street class at OSU Tulsa. The name of my paper is A Graveless Man Leaves His Mark. Simon Berry was born July 6, 1890 in Mississippi. He married Alma Pittman of Kentucky on December 19, 1915. They moved to Tennessee where Mr. Berry taught auto mechanics at Tennessee College. It is not known when the Berrys moved to Tulsa, but two addresses were given for them. First, they lived at 29 in North Cheyenne. Then he moved to 802 North Kenosha. It is possible that Edwin McCabe enticed Mr. Berry to move to Tulsa because Mr. McCabe dreamed and proclaimed that Oklahoma Territory would become an all-black state and that it was politically dominated by African Americans. Oklahoma was proclaimed a safe haven for African Americans. Mr. McCabe was called a booster among boosters. He was prominent and was a Republican and a state auditor from Kansas. It is believed Mr. McCabe rubbed off on Mr. Berry because he became a savvy businessman, developing many lucrative business around the needs of the community. Mr. Berry started a jitney service using a T-model Ford, where nickel riders could ride up and down Greenwood. Mr. Berry taught auto mechanics and opened a garage and began teaching auto mechanics to his men. He started a bus line and hired 32 of his students as bus drivers, creating the largest bus company in the area. The route was from Greenwood to 2nd Street. Mr. Berry was the first black-owned bus service. Mr. Berry's earnings from his bus company was $500 a day in 1920. For perspective, that amount would be like $6,750 in 2020. Mr. Berry's bus service is not to be confused with the trolley service that ran from Sand Springs. After the race ride, Marcus Haynes, former Globetrotter and resident of Sand Springs, said that he would ride the Sand Springs interurban trolley into downtown Tulsa. He made this long journey because he could not enter into an all-white theater in Sand Springs. I have to say that he was 17 at the time that he did that. Simon Berry operated the bus line for over 25 years. He sold the bus line to the city of Tulsa to merge with transportation efforts. He agreed to sell the business on the terms that African Americans would be allowed to ride and that the African Americans drivers would still be allowed to drive their bus routes through the Greenwood district. Simon Berry invested in the community, purchasing a large amount of land known as Lincoln Park and later became Lacey Park. The 13-acre is located on Madison Street between Virgin and Young Street. The park had a swimming pool, dance hall, and picnic grounds. He extended his service so that his passengers could go to the park. Simon Berry also owned the Royal Hotel. Mr. Berry was the first African American who purchased a plane. He and his business partner, James Lee Northington, an African American businessman and contractor, catered to black and white businessmen with their own airline charter with Simon Berry as their pilot. This community, in which Mr. Berry played a major role, was also known as the city within a city. It became self-contained and reliant. It allowed the African American community to meet its own social, economic, civil, and spiritual and provisional needs. Mr. Berry's genius and diligence was pivotal in creating the business climate that Booker T. Washington labeled as the Negro Wall Street. There is no record of the death of Simon or Alma Berry. It is believed that they were victims of the 1921 massacre, also known as the race riot. I would say that Simon Berry was, with all the things that he did, he created his own park. He had his own hotel. He did everything just wonderful, and I do think he was. What did I say? He was a phenomenal man. He was a phenomenal man.